Good morning, you guys. I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. There's basically four basic things I see everyone doing wrong with operating a chainsaw that's ruining their chainsaw. And the number one thing people need to do properly is keep their chainsaw sharp. You got to learn that right away. That goes with operating a chainsaw all the time, whether you're operating in the field or using it around your house. You need to bring a file with you and you need to learn how to use it. You also need to eventually learn how to use the raker file and how to adjust the raker depth. There's tons of videos on YouTube on how to, I have a video on how to sharpen a chainsaw. There's other videos out there that are probably better than mine. I sharpen in the field with a round file. If you can afford to take your chain to a shop and have them sharpen it on a machine, go ahead and do that. But you got to keep it sharp. And the problem with taking it into a shop is people tend to let their chain get super dull, and so they use it really dull because they don't want to pay the fee. That's just not the right way to do it, folks. You got to keep it sharp all the time. Like when I go cut wood, if I'm going to go cut firewood even, I bring my file with me and I might have to sharpen my chainsaw. Uh, the wood I'm cutting might have dirt on it. If if your bar dips into the ground and just touches the dirt or rock barely, it can totally dull the saw. I like to keep my saw razor sharp. All the years I've been doing tree work, I've never worked with anybody that keeps their chainsaw sharp. I've never picked up anybody's chainsaw that was actually sharp. Except for one time, there's a guy that had one where he had his own bench grinder, a Sylvie, which is the best. Good luck on finding one. They don't make them anymore. A Sylvie grinder for sharpening teeth on chainsaws. You have to take the chain off the bar. And he had a brand new one on his chainsaw, and I used it, and that thing cut really good. And he would carry like 4 chains with him. And when his chain would get dull, he would swap it out with one that was machined and sharp. And then he would put the new one on, take the old one off, and he would keep going. I just sharpened my chain in the field with a round file, and if it needs touching up, I touch it up. The second thing I see people doing that's wrong is they're using old gas in their chainsaw. That's really bad. Old gas is the gasoline is worse than it used to be, the mix. You need to keep your fuel mix fresh, and you have to, I use 40-to-1. So 40-to-1, you know the bottles, the bottle that says it mixes 2.5 gallons, the fuel mix bottle that will mix into 2.5 gallons. I just use 2 gallons. And I've talked to many chainsaw mechanics, professionals, that even guys that soup up chainsaws for competition, they say 40-to-1 is the way to go. They recommend it to all their clients that they work on their saws. They say use 40-to-1. You have a little more oil in there, it's not going to gum up your chainsaw. 40-to-1 is not going to cause excessive carbon buildup. They used to use, in the old days, they used to use 16-to-1. And maybe if you did that, you might get some gumming up. But the fuel mix that they use today is much better than the old fuel mix from the old days. You can run it a little richer, 40-to-1. It's not going to hurt anything. And make sure, ideally, your fuel mix shouldn't be more than a month old. Ideally, at the max 3 months. At the very max, I wouldn't even see. I have my old dump truck, and what I do is when my fuel mix gets old and I haven't used it up, I just put it in the dump truck because it's a 71. It doesn't have a catalytic converter. It I just put it in the old truck. And if you live in a place where you don't need catalytic converters, you don't have that on your vehicle, if you put like a half a gallon of mixed fuel in even a regular car, it's probably not going to hurt it because it's such a small amount that if you fill up your tank after that with gas in your car, it's going to dilute it so much it's not going to be an issue at all. So I just put it in one of my oldest vehicles. And the number 3 thing people are doing wrong is and by the way, the fuel mix that I use Stihl. So I operate all Stihl chainsaws right now. I used to have Husqvarnas. Husqvarnas are great, especially the 372, the 372 XP. I had a couple of those. I wore them out. I just run Stihls now, so I use Stihl mix. For me personally, in the summer, I use the synthetic because it's hotter. I think the engine needs more protection. And in the winter, I just use the regular because it's a lot cheaper, the orange bottle. The gray bottle in the summer when I'm running in hot conditions, hot weather, and I mix everything 40-1. And Husqvarna is a very good fuel mix, very good brand of fuel mix. And you want to use a good brand of fuel mix. Don't just use some like El Cheapo no-name brand. Okay, so the third thing I was talking about was that people are doing wrong when they operate a chainsaw is they're lugging the motor down. And 95% of all the chainsaw operators I've ever seen lug down their chainsaw. There's not very many people I've seen that understand how you're supposed to keep the RPMs up on a chainsaw. Chainsaws are designed to run wide open, screaming, full throttle. So let's say I'm holding the chainsaw in the air. I got it, it's tuned up, it's ready to go, the bar is adjusted and everything. And I'm running it in the air. I'm holding it like you hold a chainsaw properly. And I've got it revving up to its maximum, wide open. I got the throttle wide open. Whee! Now, when you cut, that's how you should enter the wood. If you got a log sitting here and you're going to cut through it, you should enter the wood with the chainsaw screaming. So that way it has a full RPM advantage. It's got its maximum torque. And so when it enters the wood, you're not suddenly lugging. Don't put the chainsaw on the wood while it's idling and then try to bring it up to RPMs. You're loading the engine too much. See, it's a little tiny engine. A chainsaw is designed to be lightweight. It's designed to have a high RPM, lightweight motor, 2-cycle engine. It's got a little tiny piston. Even my 066, the piston in it's only like that big around. It's a little tiny thing. It's running. I'm going to cut through a massive log with this little piston. So the advantage that a chainsaw has, its mechanical advantage is high RPMs. It's not designed to be lugged down like chug, chug, chug. If you don't understand what lugging something down is when you run something at too low of an RPM, too slow. It's just like, okay, say you're riding a bicycle and you got a 10 speed. When you're in the low gear, like first gear, you're riding on flat ground. Let's say you're riding on flat ground with no headwind. And you're in first gear, you can spin your wheels really fast, right? You could spin the crank really fast with your feet. If you put it in 10th gear right away at a start off, it's really hard to pedal. Like when you're starting off, and you're not going yet. You're just getting on the bike. If you start off in 10th gear, it's really hard to pedal, right? Well, that's what it's like when you take a chainsaw and you're running it slow in the wood. You want to keep the RPMs up. And here's one of the reasons why people run low RPMs, because they're not keeping their chainsaw sharp. They get their chainsaw dull, and then instead of keeping the RPMs up and being able to cut gently, like if your chain is sharp and your saw is operating properly and your air filter's clean and you're running good fuel mix, you can cut through a log without using any pressure at all. Just the weight of the chainsaw. You should be able to hold the chainsaw on the wood, and this the weight of the bar, the weight of the chainsaw should just go right through the wood. You shouldn't have to press into the wood. If you're bearing into it, if you're pressing into the wood and shoving the chainsaw into the wood, that's because your chainsaw is dull. When your chainsaw is razor sharp, it'll, in fact, if the rakers are cut down and you're using a square tooth, and you buy some chain and it's new and it's a square tooth and it's really sharp, it'll pull itself into the wood. You'll have to almost hold it back. That's what happened to me when I got my first Husqvarna 372. It came with square chain on it, and I had to eventually file it out because I just use round files. I don't use square chainsaw files. That's too much work. But anyways, square chain, if you're lucky enough to have one, or you have a sharpener like a Sylvie, and you can sharpen a square chain, good for you. That's great. I know some loggers that do that. But when you're cutting with square chain and it's really sharp, it'll like yank the chainsaw almost out of your hand. And in fact, it did. The Husqvarna, it pulled me forward because it just bit into the wood and just went into it so fast. It like pulled me forward. I was like, man, this thing cuts fast. So you got to keep your chainsaw sharp. You got to use good fuel mix, and you've got to run your chainsaw at high RPMs. When you're cutting in the wood, I would only reduce I tell my guys that I'm teaching, reduce your RPMs down to, like 20 to 25%. So let's say you're running the chainsaw and it's running at 10,000 RPMs. When you enter the wood, you should only drop it down to 8,000 or 7,500, but don't drop it down to 5,000 RPMs. When it's running wide open, I'm just estimating on average, I think a chainsaw wide open runs around 10,000 RPMs, something like that. But let's say it's running at 10,000 RPMs and you enter the wood, you only want to load the engine to the point where you're reducing the RPMs down to like 8,000. If you're reducing it down, if you're shoving it into the wood and you're reducing your RPMs down to like half the maximum RPM, you're lugging the motor too much. And that's what most people do. They're running a dull chainsaw. They're slowing the motor down too much because they're either not running at full throttle, which you're always supposed to run at full throttle when you're cutting wood. Run it wide open. You don't run a chainsaw half throttle and all that stuff. You run it wide open. You only want to reduce the RPMs a little bit. You should have your chain really sharp and it should just fly right through that wood. Unless you're cutting super dry, hard, like the hardest wood we got around here is like a madrone when it's been dry for a year laying on the ground, or a whole summer and it's gotten dried out. The stuff it's like cutting through a rock. And but anyways, if you're cutting through a fresh Douglas fir that's green, your chainsaw should just fly through it. Or ponderosa pine, that's even a dead ponderosa pine, your chainsaw should just fly right through it. Because like dead ponderosa pine is easy to cut compared to like an oak, a black oak, or a Sierra live oak, or a canyon live oak that's half dry. That's dried through the summer. That's hard as a rock too. But the fourth thing people don't do is clean their air filter. But I think the first three are the ones I see people just not doing at all. They're not sharpening their chainsaws. You guys got to learn how to sharpen your chainsaw. You got to use good fuel mix. And you've got to, and this is the thing, when you get those bottles, this is why I don't like the 1 gallon mix bottles. The 1 gallon mix bottles, like the big bottle the fuel canister, a 1 gallon fuel canister, I hate those things because this is what customers do wrong. This is what my friends that don't operate chainsaws very much, they don't understand. That bottle holds more than a gallon. So if you're using the little 1 gallon fuel mix and you put that in there and you fill up that bottle, you've got something leaner than 50 to 1. It's like probably 60 to 1, because those little gas cans that are a 1 gallon gas can, they hold more, most of them hold like 1.25 gallons. So if you fill that thing up and you're not watching the fuel pump, and that's the thing, when you go to the gas station, you're filling it up, use the gauge on the fuel pump. Don't look at your gas can, because the gas cans usually hold more than what they say. Like a 2.5 gallon gas can really holds like 3 gallons. It holds more. They have an airspace in the top. They're designed to be like that. So make sure you put in the right amount of fuel so you're not making your mix too lean. That's why I don't like the 1 gallon, because this friend of mine, he kept burning up expensive chainsaws. He was buying 026s and they would last him like 6 months and the engine was burnt. Mine lasts like 30 years. Of course, I mean, the longest I've gotten out of one without having to have it rebuilt is about 12 years of use. And I use mine all the time. I have a tree business, and I like the 2.5 gallon mix bottles, and I mix them. I watch the gauge on the fuel pump when I go to the gas station. I put in exactly 2 gallons, and I mix it 40 to 1. But cleaning the air filter, that's the fourth one. That's really easy to do. There's nothing like compressed air. Be careful if you have shop air and you have a little blower, be careful that you don't just blast it through the air filter uh, cover matrix, the screen part. Don't just put the nozzle in there and blast everything to death. Hold it back and try to be gentle with it and try to shoot in at an angle. Be careful where there's seals and hoses and gaskets, that you don't just take the compressed air and blast full pressure in there. You could damage something, because compressed air can be quite powerful. So kind of use it kind of wisely, right? Okay, so yeah, number one, keep your chainsaw sharp. Use good fuel mix. Run your chainsaw full RPMs. Run it fast. Don't lug the motor down. If you're pushing into the wood, you're overloading the engine, you're going to burn up the engine. And if you're overloading the engine and you're running bad fuel mix and you're running a dull chainsaw, you're going to burn up your chainsaw. And that's why everyone's burning up their chainsaws around me. They're not keeping their chainsaw sharp, and they're not using good fuel mix. And operating your chainsaw properly, and keep the air filter clean. And that's all I want to say. All right, you guys, that's it. I have a video on sharpening a chainsaw, and there's other people that probably have better ones too, but I sharpen mine in the field. Always use good files. I use German-made files. I use Ferd, P-F-E-R-D. Those are the best. To me, the second best is Oregon. Oregon is a good file. Make sure you get organs that are made in Switzerland.
What I meant to say was Sweden.
I bought some Oregon. I was down in Fresno, and I went to a chainsaw shop, and they were selling Oregon files made in Portugal.
Those were not good files. Do not get ones made in Portugal.
Switzerland is known for making really good files, and so is Germany. They make, and Finland is okay. I've seen a brand where they said they were made in Finland. Those Scandinavian countries, they know how to work steel, and they have good quality ore. And the Germanic countries, they know how to make files. Those are, some of the best machinists in the world. Okay, you guys, so that's that.